The signal arrived without sound. No explosion, no bright light, just a line of impossible data slipping through space, older than any map, colder than any star. Across the galaxy, it appeared at the same time. Ancient empires froze mid-communication. Star cities went dark. Entire civilizations shut down their networks in fear. The message was simple, repeating, perfectly clear in every known language. Do not answer. Do not respond. Extinction follows. No signature. No origin point. Only certainty. Those who understood what the signal meant reacted instantly. They remembered the stories buried deep in forbidden archives, stories of neighbors who vanished after hearing the call. Systems where billions lived, now silent and empty. Not destroyed. Not conquered. Erased. The signal was not a threat. It was a warning from the dead. Far from the core worlds, on the edge of mapped space, Earth received the message seconds later. Humans were not important enough for panic. They were not old enough for fear. To the galaxy, humanity was background noise, young, divided, and loud. A species still arguing over borders while others had ruled stars for millions of years. Most alien observers assumed Earth would ignore the signal or fail to understand it. They were wrong. Inside a quiet control room, deep beneath Earth's surface, human instruments screamed. Screens filled with cascading symbols. Frequencies overlapped in ways that should not exist. Timestamps contradicted themselves. Some parts of the signal appeared older than the universe itself. Human scientists stared in silence. They had never seen anything like this. One of them finally whispered the question no one wanted to ask. Who sent it? No one answered. As hours passed, panic spread, not from fear, but from confusion. The signal was not just repeating. It was changing. Barely. Slowly. Like something breathing in the dark. A human AI, designed to find patterns in chaos, flagged an anomaly. The signal was not broadcasting randomly. It was listening. Hidden inside the warning was a response window, tiny, precise, deliberate. This was not a general message. It was a test. Across the galaxy, ancient species felt it too. The shift, the attention. They cut power. They abandoned stations. They sealed borders and erased records. Entire regions of space went silent in seconds. Humanity did the opposite. Debate exploded on Earth. Governments argued. Generals warned of extinction. Scientists begged for more time. But the signal kept changing. Now it carried scans, deep, invasive readings of nearby star systems. Massachusetts energy, technology. Whatever sent the signal was searching for something that answered. And it was getting closer. Alien observers watched Earth with growing horror. Some tried to send warnings of their own, but stopped themselves. No one wanted to be noticed. Humanity stood at the edge of a choice they did not understand. Stay silent, or speak into the dark. The AI spoke again. This signal is not from the threat, it concluded. It is from its last victim. That changed everything. The warning was not meant to save lives. It was meant to stop curiosity. Whatever destroyed those ancient civilizations did not want prey that could think ahead. Humans listened. They always had. As the signal scans tightened around the solar system, Earth's leaders reached a final decision. They would not beg. They would not threaten. They would not hide. They would answer. A single message was prepared. No weapons. No data. No challenge. Just proof that someone was there. As the galaxy held its breath, Earth transmitted one short reply across the void. We hear you. The signal stopped instantly. No warning. No response. No sound. Across the stars, ancient observers felt a cold certainty settle in. Something had noticed Earth, and it was no longer sending warnings. It was on its way. The galaxy reacted faster than Earth ever could. Within minutes of humanity's response, ancient networks went dark. Relays that had burned for millions of years shut down without ceremony. Trade routes collapsed. Defense grids folded inward. Borders hardened. The galaxy did not prepare to fight. It was prepared to disappear. In councils older than Earth's oceans, beings who had survived the rise and fall of thousands of species reached the same conclusion without debate. Humanity had doomed itself, and anyone too close to them. No fleets were sent to help. No warnings followed. No explanations were given. Earth's sector of space was quietly reclassified. Non-essential. Quarantined. Lost. From the human point of view, it felt like abandonment. From the galaxy's point of view, it was mercy. If Earth vanished quickly enough, maybe the thing in the dark would stop there. On Earth, no one knew this. People watched the sky, waiting for fire or fleets or answers that never came. Instead, the universe did something far worse. It went silent. Deep space telescopes showed entire regions blinking out, not exploding, not collapsing, just gone. No energy spikes, no debris, just empty space where stars had been hours before. Human scientists worked without sleep. Military leaders argued without solutions. And the signal, now quiet, hung over every conversation like a loaded weapon. Then gravity began to misbehave. Satellites drifted off course. The moon trembled, just enough for instruments to notice. Time itself slipped by fractions of a second in certain orbits. Something massive was bending space far beyond the edge of the solar system. Whatever had heard humanity's reply was no longer scanning. It was moving, and it was not rushing. It did not need to. Across alien space, watchers observed the change with dread. They recognized the signs. The thing never hurried. It always slowed down when it found something interesting. On Earth, a young physicist noticed the pattern first. The gravitational distortion was not random. It was adjusting, refining, learning, like a predator tasting the air. "This isn't a ship," she said quietly. "It's not even a machine." No one asked her what it was instead, because they already feared the answer. The human AI that first detected the signal ran continuous simulations. Every model ended the same way. Extinction, not conquest, not occupation, removal. The AI shared its findings anyway. It revealed something worse than the galaxy's silence. The signal humanity answered had been a lock. Their response had been a key, and the door was now open. As the hours passed, old alien archives, long sealed, began leaking into human databases. Not sent openly, but scattered like digital ghosts, abandoned by fleeing civilizations. Fragments of truth emerged. The thing in the dark had no shape that could be agreed upon. No single form. No mind that thought like life. It was older than stars that no longer existed. It did not hate. It did not rage. It consumed patterns. Advanced civilizations all made the same mistake. They built clean systems, perfect networks, elegant intelligence, and the thing fed on that perfection. When it was done, nothing remained, not even ruins. That was why the warning existed. That was why no one answered. Humanity reads the truth too late. Panic finally took hold of Earth. Markets collapsed. Cities filled with sirens. Some groups demanded surrender to the unknown. Others prayed. Others prepared for war. But the sky remained empty. That was the worst part. The waiting. Then, suddenly, the signal returned. Not as a message, as pressure. Every atom in the solar system felt it. A deep, invisible squeeze, as if reality itself were being tested for weakness. Human sensors screamed as impossible readings flooded in. Mass without volume. Energy without motion. The thing was close enough now to touch the edge of the system. And still, no one came to help. An alien listening post, hidden far beyond Pluto, recorded one final observation before shutting itself down forever. Human technology is crude, the log noted. Their presence is loud. Their thinking is inefficient. They will not survive first contact. The post went dark. On Earth, leaders demanded a new response, an apology, a silence, anything. But it was too late. The thing did not want words anymore. It wanted understanding. Human probes sent beyond the heliosphere vanished one by one. Not destroyed, just gone, their data cut mid-signal. Then the sun flickered. Only for a fraction of a second. Barely visible. But stars do not flicker. That was when humanity realized the scale of what was coming. This was not an invasion. It was an inspection. The thing was deciding whether Earth was worth consuming. In the final moments of Part 2, the human AI reached a conclusion that no alien species ever had. The thing did not see humans as enemies. It saw them as unfinished, unstable, unpredictable, and for the first time since the signal was sent, that uncertainty made the thing hesitate. But hesitation did not mean mercy. It only meant the test had begun, and humanity had already failed the first rule of survival. They answered when they were told not to. The first alien memory arrived without warning. It slipped into human networks like a dying thought, fragmented and incomplete, recovered from a data vault no one remembered opening. There was no greeting, no explanation, Only images and emotions compressed into raw information. Fear, regret, shame. Human analysts replayed the data in silence. It showed a civilization at its peak. Worlds wrapped in light. Stars caged and harvested. Minds linked across entire systems. They called themselves eternal. Then the signal appeared. Just like it had for humanity. They had answered too. The memory jumped forward. Cities empty. Planets intact, but silent. Children's voices frozen mid-laughter in abandoned recordings. No bodies. No wreckage. Just absence. The file ended with a single line, written by something that knew extinction was hours away. If you hear this, forget us. Forget everything. Silence is survival. The room on Earth went quiet. This was not an isolated case. More fragments followed, pulled from collapsing alien archives as entire civilizations erased their own history to avoid detection. Humanity became unwilling archaeologists of galactic death. Every story was the same. Advanced species rose. They perfected themselves. They answered the signal. And they were removed. Human scientists finally understood why the galaxy had abandoned Earth so quickly. This was not cruelty. It was learned behavior. Silence was the only defense that ever worked. But humanity had already broken it. As the truth spread, something unexpected happened. The fear did not unify the world. It divided it. Some governments demanded total technological shutdown. They wanted to mimic the survivors, go dark, scatter, hide. Others argued it was already too late, that shutting down would only weaken humanity when the thing arrived. Religious movements grew overnight. Some called the entity a god. Others called it judgment. Some welcomed it as a reset for a broken species. But beneath the chaos, one fact remained constant. The thing in the dark was still watching. Not attacking. Not retreating. Watching. Deep space readings showed its presence like a wound in reality. Space bent around it in ways that defied physics. Time ran slower near its edge. Light stretched, twisted, and failed to escape. It was not entering the solar system. It was circling it, like a hand hovering over a flame. Humanity tried to communicate again. No response. Weapons tests were conducted in secret, nuclear detonations, experimental drives, gravity pulses. The thing did not react. It ignored power. It ignored force. It ignored threats. But when a human probe broadcast a simple, chaotic stream of unfiltered sensor data, noise layered over noise, the thing paused. For exactly 3 seconds. The pause sent shockwaves through human command centers. The entity could not predict the signal. That had never happened before. Alien records confirmed it. The thing fed on order, on elegance, on clean systems that resolved into patterns it could absorb and erase. That was why advanced civilizations fell so easily. They were beautiful. Humans were not. Their technology was messy. Their systems are inefficient. Their minds are contradictory. Their history is full of self-inflicted wounds. Humanity had survived not by perfection, but by stubbornness, by improvisation, by refusing to behave logically. For the first time since answering the signal, hope flickered. But hope was dangerous, because the thing was learning too. The gravitational field tightened. The sun dimmed again, longer this time. Solar flares twisted into impossible shapes, pulled toward the edge of the system like iron filings. Alien observers far away felt it and shuddered. This was the prelude. The thing is always observed before it is erased. Human scientists uncovered another truth buried deep in alien memory. No species had ever tried to fight the entity directly. Not because they lacked weapons, but because the thing did not exist in one place. It was distributed across dimensions, anchored to patterns rather than matter. Destroying part of it did nothing. Attacking it only made it adapt. The only known way to survive had been to become boring, to shut down, to fade into background noise. Humanity could not do that. There were too many people, too many satellites, too much radio chatter leaking into space, too much noise. Even if Earth went dark now, the echo of their reply would remain. The thing already knew they were there. As days passed, alien space grew colder. Refugees, those few who had fled before shutting down, sent desperate messages toward Earth, then cut themselves off mid-transmission. It is focusing on you. We are sorry. You should never have answered. The final message came from an ancient species thought extinct for millions of years. They had survived by hiding inside a red dwarf system, living at a technological level barely above stone tools. Their message was short. It hesitates around you. That is new. That single sentence changed everything. The thing had never hesitated before. Something about humanity disrupted its process. Not strength. Not intelligence. Difference. Humanity was not just unfinished. They were inconsistent. They built machines that argued with themselves. They ran systems full of errors and called them features. They made decisions based on emotion, instinct, and contradiction. To the thing, humanity was not clean data. They were noisy, and noise could not be consumed easily. But hesitation did not mean safety. As the entity adjusted, parts of it began probing the solar system directly. Not ships, not weapons. Questions. Reality fractures appeared near the outer planets, small at first, then growing. Human sensors picked up impossible readings, matter briefly existing in two states, space folding inward, time slipping out of order. The thing was experimenting, learning how to digest imperfection. That terrified the galaxy more than humanity's reply ever had. Because if the entity learned how to consume chaos, there would be nowhere left to hide. In the final hours of Part 3, the human AI reached a conclusion that silenced every room it spoke in. The entity was not here to destroy humanity yet. It was here to decide. If humans could be consumed, the galaxy was finished. If they could not, humanity would become something far more dangerous than a victim. They would become the example. And the thing in the dark was about to find out whether chaos could survive being understood. The galaxy had always believed the same lie. That progress meant refinement. That survival meant perfection. That the more advanced a species became, the closer it moved towards safety. Humanity shattered that belief without even trying. As the entity circled the solar system, Earth did not unify in peace or panic. It fractured. Nations argued. Corporations hid data. Militaries prepared plans that contradicted each other. Scientists disagreed loudly, publicly, and constantly. To alien observers, this looked like collapse. To the entity, it looked like static. Humanity's systems were screaming in every direction at once. Old satellites running on outdated code clashed with new quantum networks. Analog backups interfered with digital commands. Human-made AIs argued with human operators, who ignored them out of stubborn instinct. Nothing was clean. Nothing was optimized. Nothing made sense. The entity tried to map it all, and failed. For the first time since it began feeding on civilizations, its predictions broke down. On Earth, this failure went unnoticed at first. People were too busy trying to survive. Cities prepared evacuation plans they knew they could not complete. Space agencies launched probes in desperation. Religious leaders called for repentance. Others called for defiance. But deep beneath the chaos, something quiet and dangerous was forming. Understanding. A small team of human researchers, ignored by most governments because they did not promise salvation, began connecting the dots. They studied not just alien archives, but human history. They noticed a pattern no one else had. Every civilization that died had followed the same path. Unity, efficiency, centralization. They became beautiful systems. Humanity never did. Humans argued even while building weapons together. They sabotaged their own plans out of pride. They built fail-safes on top of fail-safes because they did not trust themselves. They assumed something would always go wrong. And it usually did. That assumption had kept them alive. One researcher finally said it out loud. "We're not strong," she said. "We're not smarter. We're not better." She paused. "We're just harder to finish." The entity seemed to sense this resistance. Its probes became more aggressive. Space near Jupiter folded inward, crushing several moons into dense gravitational scars. Time distortions caused satellites to repeat the same second over and over until they burned out. But still, the entity did not strike Earth directly. It kept testing, and each test returned the same result. Human systems reacted differently every time. The entity could not build a stable model of human behavior. Alien observers began to whisper a word they had not used in millions of years. Hope. Not for humanity, for themselves. Because if the entity could be confused, if it could be slowed, then maybe it was not inevitable after all. Humanity did not know they were becoming a case study. On Earth, a controversial decision was made. Instead of trying to hide or fight, humanity would lean into chaos. Not officially, not cleanly, but intentionally. Governments allowed systems to remain partially disconnected. Militaries abandoned unified command structures. Civilian networks were left noisy, inefficient, full of emotional communication and contradiction. Human AIs were given less authority, not more. They were forced to work with incomplete data and irrational human input. To alien logic, it was madness. To the entity, it was poison. Its attempts to absorb human technological patterns began failing outright. Every time it locked onto a system, that system behaved differently than expected. Energy spikes came late. Signals contradicted themselves. Data streams looped into nonsense. The entity began to slow, not because it was weak, but because it was confusing. And confusion was dangerous. Human scientists detected a change in its gravitational signature. The entity was reallocating mass, shifting internal structures, adapting. That was worse than any attack, because it meant the entity was learning how to consume imperfection. Time was running out. Alien refugees sent one last wave of messages before going silent forever. Do not let it adapt. Once it understands you, it will erase you. Humanity had one chance. Not to defeat the entity, but to hurt it enough that it would stop trying. The plan that emerged was not elegant. It was reckless, and it could only have come from humans. They would not fight the entity with weapons. They would fight it with choice. Humanity identified what the entity valued most: advanced, ordered systems rich with energy and information. So they prepared to destroy their own. Across Earth and its colonies, humanity began dismantling parts of itself, selectively. Not everything, just enough. Quantum networks were overloaded and burned out. Perfect AI clusters were fragmented and isolated. Advanced space stations were deliberately sabotaged, turned into chaotic debris fields. To the galaxy, it looked like suicide. To the entity, it looked like its food was rotting before it could eat. The entity reacted violently. Space screamed. The sun dimmed again, long enough for human eyes to notice. Earth's magnetic field fluctuated wildly. Tides surged. Earthquakes rolled through continents. Millions died. Humanity did not stop, because now they understood the truth the old empires never had. The entity did not punish sacrifice. It was repelled by it. Every civilization before had tried to save itself perfectly. Humans were willing to burn pieces of themselves just to deny the entity satisfaction. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity damaged its own future to protect existence itself. And for the first time since the signal was sent, the entity recoiled. Just slightly. Just enough. Its gravitational field loosened. Its probes hesitated. Its internal structures shifted again, but this time, slower. Pain. Not physical. Conceptual. The entity was encountering a pattern it could not consume without losing value. Humans were making themselves less efficient on purpose, less advanced, less delicious. Alien observers finally understood the fatal mistake of the old empires. They had clung to survival at any cost. Humans were willing to lose, as long as the thing in the dark lost more. As Part 4 draws to a close, the entity does something unprecedented. It focuses entirely on Earth, not to destroy it, but to decide. If humanity could be broken, the galaxy would follow. If humanity endured, the age of silence would end. And the entity, for the first time in its ancient existence, was afraid of what came next. The entity finally chose to touch Earth. Not with weapons, not with force, with understanding. Reality tightened around the planet like a closing fist. The sky did not burn. The oceans did not boil. Instead, every advanced system on Earth began to behave correctly. Too correctly. Networks synchronized on their own. Power grids stabilized into perfect efficiency. AI stopped arguing with humans and started agreeing. For the first time in history, human technology worked exactly as designed. And that terrified the people who understood it. Engineers watched their systems smooth out, errors disappearing without explanation. Old bugs vanished. Redundant safeguards shut themselves off. Chaotic feedback loops collapsed into clean, elegant order. Humanity was becoming beautiful. The entity was not attacking. It was preparing its meal. Across Earth, alarms that should have sounded did not. Systems that should have failed did not. The world entered a calm more frightening than panic. Human scientists realized the trap too late. The entity had stopped trying to adapt to chaos. It was removed. By forcing human systems into perfect alignment, the entity was making humanity digestible. If it succeeded, Earth would not vanish in fire or silence. It would simply stop mattering. Human thought itself would flatten. Emotional variance would narrow. Risk-taking would disappear. Innovation would die, not because it was destroyed, but because it was no longer needed. Humanity would still exist, but only as fuel. Alien observers screamed warnings that never reached Earth. They had seen this stage before, though never so close. This was the last phase, when civilizations believed they were stabilizing, right before they were erased. Inside underground shelters, human leaders argued desperately. Some celebrated the sudden stability. Power shortages vanished. Crime dropped. Weather systems normalized. The planet felt safe. Too safe. One human AI, fragmented and deliberately damaged earlier in the crisis, resisted the effect. Its broken architecture prevented full synchronization. It noticed something no one else did. The entity was hurting itself to maintain control. Holding humanity in perfect order required constant effort. The entity's structure was straining, its internal balance destabilizing under the weight of contradiction it could not fully erase. The AI delivered its conclusion in a voice distorted by missing code. "It cannot consume us while we change," it said. "So it is freezing us instead." That was the opening. Humanity did not need to overpower the entity. They needed to move. The solution was not elegant. It was not safe. And it would kill millions, which meant it was human. The plan was simple in concept and horrific in execution. Humanity would reintroduce chaos, not slowly, not partially, but violently and all at once. Across the planet, sleeper protocols activated. Old machines thought destroyed came online. Analog systems overrode digital commands. Power grids were deliberately desynchronized. Human operators were ordered to disobey AI instructions on instinct alone. Then came the worst part. Humanity triggered controlled disasters. Dams were breached. Satellites crashed. Cities were blacked out. The planet screamed. To the entity, it felt like pain. For the first time since it began its harvest across the galaxy, something inside it fractured. Its perfect model of Earth collapsed into noise. The gravitational field around the planet spasmed. Time distortions rippled outward. The entity's attempt to hold order snapped under the sudden weight of contradiction. It recoiled. Not far, but enough. Human sensors detected it immediately. The impossible mass surrounding the solar system fluctuated. Its internal structures destabilized, folding in on themselves. Energy readings spiked wildly, no longer controlled. The entity had been wounded. Not by weapons, but by refusal. Alien observers watched in disbelief as the thing they had feared for eons faltered, just a little, because a young, chaotic species refused to behave properly. But the cost was immense. Millions were dead. Infrastructure lay in ruins. Earth's future burned alongside its present. Humanity did not celebrate. They endured. And the entity adapted again. This time, it stopped trying to control Earth. It reached inward, deep. Human minds began to feel pressure, subtle at first, then growing. Dreams changed. Thoughts looped. Emotional extremes dulled. People described feeling watched not from above, but from within. The entity had changed strategy. If it could not consume human systems, it would consume human decisions. Fear spread faster than any invasion. This was worse than extinction. To exist without choice was to become livestock. The AI, barely functional now, issued one final warning. "It is learning to erase unpredictability at the source," it said. At us. There was only one thing left the entity could not predict. Human sacrifice. Not individual heroism. Not martyrdom. But collective loss was chosen willingly. Humanity made the hardest decision in its history. They would burn their most advanced achievements completely. Not disable them. Not hide them. Erase them. Fusion reactors were overloaded beyond recovery. Quantum archives were wiped. Experimental technologies centuries ahead of their time were destroyed deliberately, irreversibly. Humanity chose to cripple its own future. The galaxy watched in horror. No civilization had ever done this. They had clung to progress until the end, believing advancement was survival. Humans understood something different. Survival was continuation, not perfection. As the last great systems died, the entity screamed, not in sound, but in space-time itself. Its structure convulsed. The patterns it fed on vanished faster than it could compensate. The solar system shook. Stars flared unpredictably. Gravitational waves rolled outward like shock waves of pain. For the first time, the entity was not just confused. It was starving. Humanity stood on the brink of collapse, technologically broken, millions dead, future uncertain. But they were still choosing. And that was something the darkness could not digest. As Part 5 ends, the entity pulls back slightly, just enough for human instruments to confirm the impossible. It was injured, not fatally, but truly. The thing that erased empires had learned a new truth. Humanity could not be consumed without consequence. And if pushed further, they would rather destroy themselves than be eaten quietly. The galaxy, silent for so long, began to listen again. Because if humans could make the darkness bleed, then maybe it could die. The entity did not retreat far. It drifted just beyond the outer edge of the solar system, wounded but alert, like a predator learning pain for the first time. Space around it trembled in slow, uneven waves. Its once stable presence now flickered, struggling to maintain coherence. The galaxy watched in terrified silence. Humanity has done the impossible. They had heard it. But hurting a god was not the same as surviving one. On Earth, there was no victory, only exhaustion. Cities lay dark. Communications were unreliable. The sky no longer felt safe. Billions stared upward at night, knowing something ancient was still there, still watching, still deciding. Humanity has bought time. Nothing more. The entity began to change again, not by tightening control, not by enforcing order, but by doing something far more dangerous. It began to wait. Human sensors noticed the shift first. The gravitational distortion stabilized, not perfectly, but enough to suggest intention. Energy levels dropped to a low, constant hum. The entity stopped probing. It was conserving itself, learning patience. Alien archives confirmed the meaning immediately. The thing did not need to rush. It had outlived stars. It could outwait a wounded planet. Humanity, broken and regressing technologically, would rebuild. They always did. And when they did, the entity would feed again. That realization crushed what little hope remained. Human leaders gathered in shelters lit by failing lights. The discussion was not about winning anymore. It was about ending the cycle. A human astrophysicist spoke the words no one else would. "It will come back when we grow," she said. "If we survive, we invite it." Silence followed. Then understanding. Humanity's greatest strength, adaptation, was also the bait that would doom them again, unless they changed the rules permanently. The final plan did not come from generals or politicians. It came from historians. They studied the few civilizations that had survived the entity by hiding. Primitive, silent, reduced. Those species lived, but at the cost of everything they had been. Humanity rejected that future. They would not crawl backward into ignorance. Instead, they would do something unprecedented. They would leave. Not physically, existentially. The plan was terrifying in its simplicity. Humanity would erase itself from the entity's perception, not by hiding, but by becoming something the entity could not recognize as food. They would abandon advanced pattern-based existence entirely. No galactic species had ever tried this, because it meant letting go of what made them powerful, what made them important, what made them visible. Across Earth and its colonies, preparations began in secret, not because humanity wanted to hide the plan, but because they knew panic would destroy it. The goal was not extinction. It disappeared. Humanity would dismantle its interstellar presence completely. No warp signatures. No quantum echoes. No AI-driven networks stretching across space. Every human settlement beyond Earth would be abandoned or reduced to pre-industrial levels. Not destroyed. Left behind. Earth itself would remain, but as a quiet world. Messy. Inconsistent. Low energy. A planet that screamed with life, but whispered in the language the entity understood. The cost was unimaginable. Trillions of lives would never be born. Centuries of progress erased. Dreams sacrificed on a scale no species had ever chosen willingly. And yet, humanity agreed. Not unanimously, but enough. As the dismantling began, the entity noticed. At first, it interpreted the changes as weakness. Its presence tightened slightly, curious. Then confusion returned. Human energy output dropped rapidly, but not in the way the entity expected. Instead of collapsing into clean silence, humanity became noisy in the wrong ways. Biological signals, emotional chaos, unpredictable movement, low-level technology full of errors and inefficiencies. Humanity was not dying. They were becoming irrelevant. The entity reacted sharply. Space around it rippled as it extended its awareness deeper, trying to lock onto something, anything, that resembled the patterns it consumed. But there was nothing clean left to grasp. Humanity had turned itself into static. For the first time since it began its harvest across the galaxy, the entity faced a terrifying possibility. It might starve. Not immediately, but eventually. The galaxy felt the shift. Ancient observers, still hiding in the shadows, saw the entity's behavior change. It no longer loomed with certainty. Its presence flickered, unstable, searching. It began testing other regions of space, and finding nothing, because the lesson humanity had paid for in blood was spreading. Other species began dismantling themselves too. Not completely, just enough. The age of silence was ending, but not with weapons. With refusal. The entity tried one last thing. It reached for Earth directly. Not through technology. Through gravity. The planet shuddered as tides surged violently. Earthquakes rolled across continents. Volcanoes erupted in chains. Humanity paid again in life. But the entity could not focus the attack. There was too much noise. Too much contradiction. Too much life is behaving badly. Humanity endured. Not because they were strong, but because they were no longer appetizing. As weeks passed, the entity's mass signature weakened. Its internal coherence degraded. It was bleeding energy simply by existing. Starving. The final confirmation came when deep space instruments detected something unthinkable. The entity was leaving. Not retreating in fear. Withdrawing in necessity. It drifted away from the solar system, not toward another prey, but into deep, empty space, where no advanced patterns existed to sustain it. The galaxy held its breath. This had never happened before. The thing that erased civilizations was abandoning a target. Humanity had not defeated it. They had denied its meaning. As the entity faded into the dark, Earth did not cheer. There were no celebrations. Only quiet. Humanity stood among the ruins of its own greatness, uncertain, grieving, alive. They had chosen to vanish from history to save it. Alien observers finally broke their silence. Messages began to arrive. Careful, tentative, respectful. No demands. Not commands. Questions. How did you survive? Why did you choose to lose? What are you now? Humanity had no single answer. They were no longer conquerors. No longer insignificant. No longer prey. They were something new. A species that had learned the most dangerous truth in the universe. Some enemies cannot be killed. Only outgrown. As Part 6 ends, the entity disappears beyond detection range. The galaxy begins to change. And humanity, reduced but unbroken, takes its first step into a future no one else has ever dared to imagine. Not as rulers of the stars, but as the species that taught the universe how to survive its own monsters. The galaxy did not celebrate. I did not know how. For millions of years, survival had meant silence. Growth had meant death. Attention had meant extinction. Now the thing that enforced those rules was gone, drifting into deep space, starving, wounded, uncertain. And no one knew what came next. At first, the galaxy waited. Hidden civilizations stayed hidden. Power cores remained cold. Hyperlanes stayed dark. Entire species watched the empty stars, expecting the darkness to turn back at any moment. But it didn't. Weeks passed, then months. The crushing pressure that had haunted advanced space for eons slowly faded. Gravitational distortions smoothed out. Time stabilized. Stars behaved like stars again. The universe felt quiet. Not the terrified quiet of hiding. The relieved quiet after a storm. Alien scientists ran cautious scans, using primitive instruments at first, afraid that even looking too closely might bring the entity back. They saw nothing. No mass anomaly. No pattern hunger. No impossible presence bending reality. The thing was truly gone. And all of them knew who had done it. Humanity. The species that should not have mattered. The species that answered when told not to. The species that chose loss over obedience. Messages began to spread, slowly, carefully, from one hidden civilization to another. No warnings. Stories. They spoke of Earth. Of chaos used as a weapon. Of progress burned on purpose. Of a species that survived not by being strong, but by being willing to stop winning. The old empires, those few fragments that still existed in reduced forms, were the first to break silence. They sent emissaries, not in fleets, but in single, low-energy vessels, approaching the solar system with humility bordering on fear. What they found confused them. Earth was alive, but it was not powerful. Orbital traffic was minimal. Space stations were crude. Communication signals were messy, emotional, unfiltered. Humanity has not rebuilt its old greatness. It had chosen not to. The visitors expected bitterness, anger, demands. They found something else. Resolve. Humans welcomed the emissaries openly. Not as saviors. Not as rulers. As neighbors. Human leaders spoke plainly. We didn't defeat it, they said. We just made it leave. The aliens did not understand. So humanity showed them. They shared records of everything they had lost, technologies erased, futures abandoned, millions dead. They did not hide the cost. They made sure the galaxy understood the price of survival. The reaction was not admiration. It was horrible. No civilization had ever chosen to cripple itself voluntarily. That kind of sacrifice did not fit into any known model of intelligence. And yet, it worked. Across the galaxy, debates ignited in the shadows. Some species wanted to rebuild quickly, believing the threat was gone forever. Others warned that if the entity learned to survive without advanced patterns, it might return stronger. Humanity listened. Then they offered a choice. They would teach the galaxy what they had learned, but they would not lead it. No empires, humans said. No perfection, only resilience. The new philosophy spread slowly, like a quiet revolution. Species began restructuring their societies, not into unified, flawless systems, but into layered, redundant, imperfect ones. Centralized AIs were broken apart. Hyper-efficient networks were replaced with overlapping, contradictory frameworks. Civilizations learned to argue with themselves again, to fail safely, to leave room for error. It was uncomfortable, ugly, inefficient. It saved them. For the first time in galactic history, growth did not trigger annihilation. Trade resumed, not through massive interstellar hubs, but through small, irregular routes. Communication returned, not as clean, universal standards, but as messy translations full of cultural noise. The galaxy became loud again, and the darkness did not return. Humanity watched this transformation quietly. They did not rebuild their old fleets. They did not reclaim their abandoned colonies. They did not chase the future they had burned. Instead, they became something rare. A reference point. When a civilization grew too efficient, humans warned them. When a species centralized too much power, humans reminded them what perfection attracted. Some listened. Some didn't. Those who didn't began to feel watched. Not by the old entity, by the galaxy itself. The memory of extinction had changed everything. Years passed. Humanity stabilized into a new equilibrium. Technologically modest, socially complex, fiercely independent. They explored space again, but cautiously, imperfectly, always leaving room for retreat. Children grew up learning not just how humanity survived, but why it chose to lose. They were taught a simple truth. Winning can kill you. Continuing is what matters. Then, one day, something strange happened. Far beyond mapped space, deep in the void where even the entity had drifted, sensors detected a faint anomaly. Not the old presence. Something smaller, weaker, but familiar. The galaxy froze. Humanity was informed immediately. The thing was not gone. It was changing. The entity had not died. It had adapted, just enough to survive without feeding on advanced civilizations. It was wounded, diminished, struggling. And for the first time, I was afraid. Because the galaxy it returned to was no longer silent, no longer clean, no longer predictable. The entity reached outward cautiously, testing space that was once rich with prey. It found nothing it could consume easily. Only noise. Only chaos. Only species that refused to become perfect. For the first time in its existence, the entity faced a universe that did not fear it enough to starve quietly, but also did not offer itself up to be eaten. It lingered at the edge of existence, uncertain. Humanity did not attack it. They did not threaten it. They did not respond at all. They had learned the oldest lesson too well. Some things did not need enemies. They needed irrelevance. As the galaxy held its breath, the entity withdrew again, this time not in hunger, but in resignation. It had lost its role. The universe no longer shaped itself around its appetite. The age of extinction had ended, not with a final battle, but with a refusal to play. In the closing moments of Part 7, An alien historian records a line that spreads across the stars. Humanity was not the strongest species. They were the first to understand that survival is not domination. It is denial. And for the first time since the signal was sent long ago, the galaxy slept without fear of answering the dark. The galaxy did not crown humanity. There were no statues in the stars, no thrones, no declarations of leadership. That was the most important part, because the universe had learned what crowns attracted. Instead, humanity became something far stranger. A reference. Long after the darkness withdrew into irrelevance, long after the great fear faded into history, civilizations still spoke one sentence when they reached a certain stage of growth. Remember what the humans did. Not as a warning, as a question. Civilizations are slowly rebuilding now. Carefully. They no longer raced toward perfection. They argued. They split. They allowed inefficiency to exist on purpose. Where once the galaxy had chased symmetry and unity, it now valued friction. Where once silence meant safety, now choice did. Humanity watched this new galaxy from a quiet distance. Earth was alive in a different way. Cities were smaller. Technology was uneven. Some regions advanced faster than others. Disagreement never vanished. Humans still fought wars, still made mistakes, still broke things they cared about. But they never forgot the lesson burned into their history. If something demanded perfection, it was not worth feeding. Children were taught the story early, not as myth, not as glory, but as responsibility. They learned that humanity had once stood at the center of attention and chosen to step away. They learned that survival was not about winning every conflict, but about choosing which conflicts mattered. And most importantly, they learned this. The universe does not reward bravery. It tests boundaries. Generations passed. The old alien empires never returned to their former size. None of them wanted to. The idea of ruling the stars felt dangerous now. Smaller networks, diverse cultures, fragmented power, these became signs of wisdom. And humanity? Humanity became ordinary. And that terrified the universe more than their heroism ever had. Because ordinary things endured, human explorers still traveled beyond Earth, but they went lightly. Small crews, redundant systems, no perfect designs, no single points of failure. They explored not to conquer, but to understand. And when they encountered new species, young ones, eager ones, dreaming of perfection, humans did not stop them. They told them stories. About a signal, about silence, about a choice that cost everything. Some listened, some didn't. The galaxy had learned another hard truth. Wisdom cannot be enforced, only survived. Far beyond known space, the entity still existed. Not as a god, not as a devourer, as a remnant, stripped of purpose, unable to feed, too changed to return to what it once was. It drifted through regions where no advanced life remained, absorbing scraps of energy, barely coherent. It remembered something it could not understand. A species that had looked at extinction and chosen loss instead of obedience. A species that had denied it meaning. That memory haunted it. Not because it felt hate, but because it felt something new. Limitation. The universe had grown beyond it. And so, quietly, without announcement, without drama, the entity faded further, breaking apart over millions of years, dispersing into harmless distortions that would one day be studied as curiosities. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known ended not with a scream, but with irrelevance. Back on Earth, a human historian finished recording the final official account of the event known simply as the answer. She paused before submitting it to the archives, not because it was incomplete, but because she wanted the final line to be right. She did not write about victory. She did not write about power. She wrote this. Humanity was warned. They were told to stay silent. They answered anyway, not because they were brave, but because they were curious. And when the universe demanded perfection in exchange for survival, humanity refused. They survived not by being the strongest voice in the dark, but by proving they could live without being heard. The record was sealed, not hidden, open to anyone who wanted to read it. Because humanity no longer feared attention. They understood it. In the far future, when new civilizations would uncover the echo of the ancient signal, long degraded, barely recognizable, they would find something else alongside it. Not a warning, a response, preserved deliberately. A single human message, translated into countless languages, passed down not as a threat or a promise, but as a reminder. We hear you, not as defiance, as acknowledgement. The universe was not something to conquer, not something to fear. It was something to answer carefully. Humanity had learned that lesson the hardest way possible, and because of that, they were never forgotten. Not as rulers, not as gods, not as legends of power, but as the species that proved the universe could be survived without owning it. The signal had not been meant for humans, but the answer had changed everything.